and welcome back to another episode of The Joe of Painting. I am Joe Lawson, and I am your host and painter today. So in this series, we've been exploring Bob Ross tools and techniques, as well as our own, and just seeing how oil paint hits the canvas and seeing what we can do with that. But last painting I was doing, I kind of hit a wall. I was like doing all these landscapes, and I was like, I don't really know if I can keep pushing this. I feel like my skill is going to advance over time, obviously, but I was being really pulled towards more illustration rather than doing these big, sweeping landscapes. And that's not to say we're not going to do any more of those, but I just wanted to try out doing something, a different technique I've seen. I picked this up from some artists I've watched paint before, specifically Alex Gray. I saw him paint live once, and when I got there to the show, I saw he had the canvas set up, and before the show started, he had the figure of what he was going to paint sketched out with his paintbrush. And from what I could tell, I don't think he was doing the wet-on-wet technique that Bob introduced us to or passed on to us. But he was just doing, he had a clean, probably a gessoed canvas, which gesso, from my understanding, is, so this is a very there's a lot of friction and texture here, and I think gesso is just a thin layer that you basically prime your canvas with, and it becomes a nice smooth white surface. So he might be using one of those canvases, but today we're just using a canvas right out of the wrapper, straight from Michael's or any other craft store, and just our Dave paints. We have titanium white. This is a purple red. This is a vermilion red. We have a lemon yellow, which if you have a cadmium yellow, that'll work. I think the lemon yellow is just that mid-cadmium yellow with just a little more white in it. We have a yellow ochre. This is our burnt umber. We have an ultra blue, a sap green, and our ivory or a Mars black. So from that, we will be painting a character from one of my favorite video games. I'm gonna sketch it first, and then you'll see. I'm not gonna tell you what it is or who it is. So this will start our portraits. I was kind of apprehensive about doing those, but I'm excited about this one, so we're going to jump right in. And so like I said, I'm just going to sketch this on. I have a little number 2 flathead pencil brush, and I'm just going to get a little bit. I'm going to do, this character has a lot of brown in them, so I'm going to use this burnt umber. You don't need a lot because you can come back for more, so just get enough to create some brush strokes. And so what I'm going to do, I'm not going to start painting right away. I'm going to build this. I'm going to start with dots and points, and then those dots and points I'm going to basically connect the dots, and we're going to build our forms, and we're going to build out our character. And then once we see our character, once that character is alive on the canvas, then we'll tighten up those lines just a little bit because they're not too important. They're just guidelines. We'll be painting over them. And then the next stage is we will be mixing the colors that we need, and we'll be blocking those colors out. So before we do any fine details, we're going to fill in what we drew with our dots and lines with those solid colors. And then stage 3 is when we go in and start adding those details and adding the light and the shadow and giving it some depth. And the same thing with the background. I think before I even block in colors and I get my character on the page how I want them, I'm going to go in and do some sort of background and get that in there. And it's okay if I cross over the line a little bit because, again, I'm going to be blocking color and then I'm going to be adding details. So whatever background elements encroach into my sketch is okay because, again, they're layer 1 essentially. All right, so let's get started. Like I said, I'm using my burnt umber. And I do have a reference over here taped up on the wall that I'm just going to look at just to keep this accurate. But mostly, I'm going to be pulling from here. This is a game I've played a lot, many different games, sequels, different adaptions. So I'm going to be trying to tap into this as much as possible. This being your brain. So this is the top of his head. Let's say about here. About here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You make these strikes, but again, these are layer 1. These are not going to be anywhere to be found once this painting is over with. That's the hope. And so this guy's face is about this wide. And I'm kind of keeping these centered. So rule of thirds, you split the vertical 3 ways, horizontally 3 ways. And these are sort of just That's the sweet spot. So that's what I'm aiming for. That's sort of my first guideline in anchoring my character. All right. Some of you will probably recognize this guy pretty quickly. And this is more illustration, you know. I just happen to be using oil paints. I'm not really, my aim isn't to be an oil painter. It's to explore this medium. See, now this is fun. Not to say those landscapes weren't, but they're a taller order to fill. And I can already see this guy coming to life. So I'm going to bring his nose to about there. Yeah. And again, you can play with these lines, you know, like originally that was the tip of his nose. Now this is the tip of his nose. Now that's the tip of his nose. But really it comes down to how all these elements are playing together. There's, it's like what makes a character recognizable? You know, what makes a drawing come to life, and when you see that drawing, be like, oh, that's who that is. There's a certain cocktail of proportions and elements that are interplaying with each other constantly. That's why when you see somebody draw a character and it doesn't look like that character, it's like, well, I can see what you're going for, but you didn't quite hit the mark. That's okay. That happens. That is the practice. You have to learn what you don't know so you can know what you do know. I don't know. I'll revisit that one. And this burnt umber will come in great handy just because he is a brown wooden mask. So we'll be leaning on that fairly heavily, but we'll be using our ochre and our yellows to really give that brown some depth. Wood isn't just brown. There's a lot going on in there. And I personally, as an artist, need to work on getting comfortable with throwing some yellow and green into a brown log because, you know, light's hitting natural forms in all sorts of ways all the time. So ideally I would have brought him down a little more. And it's okay if, you know, these feathers are kind of going off the page. He's recognizable. And again, these are just guidelines. They're not final commitments. You could step back from this in a second and look at your painting. Whether you're using oil, acrylic, pencil, colored pencil, pastels, finger painting with tempera paint, whatever you're doing. Using ketchup and ranch dressing, I don't care. But sketch this guy out and then step back and be like, is that who I picture? So now, you know, I wanted this nice static image of him in the center, just kind of floating, kind of regal. But he looks like he's coming at you. And he's almost got this like swoop to his face, like his jaw is dropping, like he's yelling at you or something. So his goatee, which I was going to make symmetrical right here, which to me would imply that he's centered and steady, I'm going to give it a slight swoop, like he's flying. Let's see, his goatee's about here. Oh yeah. And again, these are just guidelines. They're suggestions for later when you're filling in color and adding detail. But you take it with a grain of salt. And you, as the artist, as the executive, make the decisions. And all these little details, all these little bits of information tell you something about how he's constructed as a character, not necessarily as a drawing. I really like this. And the great thing about using these Davoloo paints is that they're thinner than usual, or than some of the other oil paints I've found. And like I know in like oil painting, you know there are all these like oils and spirits that you can add to the paint to thin it or thicken it, or you know make it interact in a certain way. You know, make your colors interact as layers in a more advanced way. And so they, you know, I've noticed that they come pretty thick, almost like a toothpaste or even like a natural peanut butter. That's what this yellow ochre reminds me of. It's real thick. But then when you look at these Davoloo colors, you can see the shimmer on them, which means there's more oil. There's more of a medium in there. You can see this vermilion. It's even like an oil slick almost that it's sliding down. These thicker paints on a dry canvas, I've tried it before, and it's like, again, like a spoonful of peanut butter in your mouth, and it just gets stuck. But these wetter paints on a dry canvas, they just want to slip and slide around. So I think that's really going to allow us to have fun with this and not need necessarily a wet base or even the gesso. So we'll see. This is an experiment. We're living and learning, and luckily we're doing these videos so they'll be on the record, so you can come back and you can see where I've succeeded and failed in this regard. All right, I'm going to tighten up these feathers a little more just so I know what they're doing. Right now they're pretty generic, but I kind of want to give them a little more body. You see feathers with, some of the feathers are loose, or there's a part in the bristles of the feather. We're going to give them some of those. And again, see, I drew that line there, and I'm going to cut in there, so this will be my solid color. So what am I going to do with that line? That's where our background comes in. We'll be able to clean up this drawing, essentially. And pay attention to your cuts. You don't want, again, we talk about gestalt, and I don't really say that word a lot, but basically what I'm saying is gestalt is sort of, when I say practice your chaos, a good entryway into that is gestalt, because it's the psychology of visual communication. Whether you're doing graphic design or painting and oil painting in the Renaissance, you're using these principles to create an interesting image. You're capturing a moment in time that, though the viewer knows it's still in there and it's one frame, it still has this movement to it. And that's what Gestalt does. It's the artist interfaces with how we naturally see things, and then you build that into your composition, your painting, your brochure, your graphic design, whatever you're doing, your animation, and there's this liveliness to it. I got a little bit of my liquid white, mixed it up, make sure the oil and the paint was nice and smooth, and I did about 2 or 3 tablespoons in just a paper cup, whatever you got, something preferably disposable. And then I'm going to get my little palette knife, some of my blue, and a little bit of black, and just get mixing. And it's okay if these aren't perfect, because this is going to be a base, and it's going to be a very eclectic background, so it doesn't have to be a nice smooth color, and you might want some natural marbling in there. I'm going to start this out with my little 1-inch brush and just get started here. And just kind of get in close. And again, it's okay if it encroaches a little bit. And the objective is just to spread this out. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. We're just sketching, having fun. We can address anything that pops up where you're like, oh no, we'll tackle that later. Don't fret. Since this liquid white is so thin, I did, like I said, about 3 tablespoons of the liquid white. I'd say start with 1 and add your blues and your blacks and your purples and see what you get. It won't be a lot, but just remember, just like a little dot of this just goes a long way. And especially if you're smart about, if you use your brush strokes properly to pull it, to different areas of the canvas, you'll have no problem covering what you need to cover with just that little amount. Because I have a lot left over here. All right, I'm going to put this down. I'm just going to jump in with some of this stuff. Let's see. Grab. Ooh. Ah! That's all right. This is my art shirt. This is more of a stream of consciousness painting, which, again, having more fun, and it's coming out how I want it to. Great thing about stream of consciousness is that I don't know what it looks like, what I want, what it looks like, but I feel it. And each brush stroke is like, ooh, that's it, or nah. You'll catch a hang of that someday. Or maybe you got it. We all got it. You just got to tap into it. So now I'm just kind of going right up to the edge of that drawing, pressing and pulling and flicking. Just kind of giving it this burst effect. I want Aku's coming at you. He's like, Crash, what the fuck have you been doing? Eating wampa fruit on the beach? Your sister has been kidnapped. I'm just ready to start blocking out colors. So, whoop, I have this, what size are you? This is number 12. So it's that first brush I sketched it out with, I'm going to fill it in with. And I'm going to start with my umber again. You know what? A dry canvas is pretty spectacular. Because these wet paints, they'll sit and they'll hold and they'll go where you want, but they're also willing to move and expand and fill in. Wet on wet's awesome, don't get me wrong. It's just, I don't know if it's for me. That's okay. There are plenty of other mediums that need attention, that want your attention. Man, it's almost like a marker. And you'll see darker areas, they're just holding paint. I'll just go up there and, again, just fill up my brush with those. Oops. And pull it around. And this brush, you can use any size. I mean, I'm just using this one because it's small enough to get into these spaces, but it's also big enough to cover larger areas. So it's really up to you, your discretion. I'm just kind of just filling it in, blocking it out. Mix my colors, letting the yellow and the red mix, but also be a little marbly, so there's some cool texture, highlight stuff going on. Just doing it in thin layers because you can always add, but you can't take away. I guess you could take away by adding, but it's not exactly what we're going for. More yellow. Give them a quick clean real quick. Double quick. Dry, 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 dry. You don't want any of that paint thinner on your canvas. Mix it with your paint. And again, pay attention to the line work and the form, because if you get too sloppy with it, you might risk taking away a particular piece of Aku's face that makes him Aku, if that makes sense. The slope in his lip, the way his jowl hangs. All of these things are what give him character. Because his teeth are white, I'm going to try and absorb this line work I did with the umber into the lip volume, if that makes sense. Rather than leaving it on the outside of the lip, I'm just going to paint over it and incorporate it. And that way I'll leave as much white canvas for his teeth. So that way they're not picking up any unwanted browns or yellows, which they inevitably will, just because oil painting is crazy. I'll use the same dude. So we're going to start with our blue. We need more blue, but I'll work with what we got. Luckily, this ultra blue is pretty powerful, so even if it did make contact with these outer paints, I have a feeling it'd hold its own. Yep, we're doing all right. So I'm just now grabbing this outline, really setting it into the painting. All right, moving on to yellow. Clean this guy out. I'm gonna use the same guy. So, what do I want to do next? I want to mix that green. So I'm going to take my little palette knife, and then this remainder of the yellow, I'm going to take just a notch of my sap green. Throw that in there. I'm going to put my brush down real quick. Yeah, let's see if we can mix up our real cool green. I'm just picking it up all on the knife and spreading it out. Do just a dash more of the sap green. And again, it's powerful, so just a dab will do ya. I'm getting like a spearmint color now. I can work with that. And we'll go in and highlight with just straight up lemon yellow when we get to that point. Alright. Gonna get as much of that on my palette as I can. Clean off your knife. Be careful that umber wants to just jump in. It's like, what you doing? Nothing, umber. And gently just pulling paint into these edges and corners. Being real gentle. It's actually working nice. Just carrying that paint across from where it's densest into the areas where it needs more. Alright. I'm going to clean this out. And I'll probably, again, touch those up as I do past number 2. Clean, dry, and then I'm just going to take some straight up lemon yellow, start working on those eyes. Work from the edge in, just because that the center of the eye is white. And we'll start with some white in the center and work our way out. And merge those nicely. In hindsight, I don't know if I would draw things out in that burnt umber. Hindsight's 20/20. Haha, I'm working on eyes, get it? Take my brush and making little soft circles. Whoa! Man, this is a yellow shirt day for sure. There's got more yellow on it. Dang, he's got crazy eyes. Aku, you look fucking awesome. Dude. Paint thinner out. Beat the rest out. Dry, clean brush. Gonna go visit white, just a little bit. Load it up, but don't load it up too much. And just start applying a little bit at a time to the center until you feel like you have a decent pool that can meet that yellow we just put down in the middle. Visit some white again. Plant it in the middle of that pupil. Get a good little short island of white going. Load that brush up. I'm trying to keep that center point as white as possible. I don't want any other color jumping in there. There's such a fine line between that yellow and the white. You have to be really intentional about those distinctions. And just do some white and start giving these teeth some white, some wet white paint. Because I'm going to do these mouth corners, there's heavy shadow in there, so I'm probably just going to do straight black. And so once I paint those in, I might start pulling the black into the crevices of the teeth where there's other shadow, and that hopefully the white and the black will mingle and I'll get a gray. And totally bring in this dry black brush into my lip shadow. Man, Aku is pissed. What are you so mad about, buddy? I might just give him one big black outline, make him pop off the page after I get that backdrop to where I want it. So what I'm doing is towards the sides of the teeth, I'm having the deepest black pooling out of that black area and moving into the gray here. So it's almost implying that there's like his teeth have some roundness to them. Maybe they're protruding a little more, they're receiving more light. But back here in these corners, that's where our blackest black is. When I'm doing these teeth gaps, again, there's a deeper, darker crevice up towards the top, and it gets shallower towards this median. And so when I push in with the black, I push and I pull, and then as I want it to taper, I'm pulling off with my brush. Real gently, 2 hairs and some air, just kind of pushing a little bit of that black into this mustardy color, or this brown color from the lips, and then the same thing pulling down in, I'm like stitching almost, and then I'm, with those 2 hairs and some air, just kind of merging them together, getting a middle color. That's the thing about painting, is like, I expect everything has to be a brush stroke, but you can do a lot of pen details in paint. So now we're going to move down here the goatee. See if we can make that pop a little more. We still got some green. I'm really going to lay in some on these edges. I'm just kind of pulling the highlights and the colors into each other. Just diffusing that edge. Let's see. Aku! Alright, clean, dry, a little brush. Let's work on his nose a little bit. He was neglected there. I'm going to take a little white here. I just took a little bit of white and I'm just working it into the existing paint. And I've basically split his nose in half. And so that right there, that's a great example of you have a solid color. You are like, okay, is this flat? Is this in space? Is there dimension to this? And so just lightening up one half of it shows you two planes now. So that flat shape became this almost pyramid shape. I have to say, this painting process has redeemed the whole thing for me, just because I wasn't really finding my niche. I wasn't finding my spot in the wet-on-wet landscape. And again, that doesn't mean I'm not going to go back there, but this year I'm having a lot of fun with this. I feel like I'm in more control with paint. It's more illustrative, however you say it. Let's see. There's more freedom involved. It's not so much about nailing the landscape. I mean, this is a caricature. Let's see. All right. So now I'm going to take a little bit of that purple red and a little bit of vermilion and just kind of meet them in the middle. I have them right here. Just kind of dancing here. Maybe a little yellow. And I'm just going for some kind of deep but neutral orange. I don't need a lot because I'm just doing the brows at this point. And again, if you layer lightly enough, you can lay in your vermilion, and then you can lay in your yellow, and you can lay in your purple red, and just kind of mix them right there on the spot. So I'm giving him this one big baseline on his brow. And then from my reference, I see, just to give him a bit more expression, he has another one kind of running up through the center here. It kind of lifts off. Kind of gives him an inquisitive brow. He's sort of like, what? Say what? You did what, Crash? And also, if I give him this little notch here, it's even more expression. I might visit a little more of that purple red because it's deeper and it'll contrast better with these lighter colors. Oh yeah. And right on that edge, I'm just kind of smoothing it in. These lines I added, if it looks like they're just sitting on top of that orange, they call too much attention to your eye. So it's good to go in just on the edge where that orange meets that red orange that I just made. Just diffuse that line, bring some of the yellow into the orange and vice versa, and then they'll make their own middle color. Magical. Oh, you guys, I'm really enjoying this painting. And then lastly, I'll give this guy, well, I'll leave that in there. I'm going to get a little bit more white this time and bring it down here and mix up that same orange and just give it a, almost like a coral color. Actually, scratch that. Abort that mission. Clean and dry. a little pencil brush, and we're just going to go straight in with just a little bit of white. Lay down a little bit just to see how it hits. And we'll just hit the top of his brow. A little more. You don't need a lot. We're just lighting it up, creating some contrast. However you see fit, it's your painting. And same method, just kind of gently fluff the edge. And diffuse that line. Maybe leave it prominent in some areas, for that indicates a harder light. There's a heavy light source hitting there. But the softer light, it's further away. It's more broad. But it's cool to have some hard edges. And that also, light also indicates your material as well. It's sort of like, what is he made of? We know the mask is wood, but what about those eyebrows? Is it plastic? Is it glass? Some sort of magical, smooth substance? It's really up to you. But I'm noticing that these highlights are doing wonders. So now I'm like right in this area. There was just where the eye met the nose, met the eyebrow, met the mask. There was just sort of like a uncertainty there, uncertain threshold. So now I'm just reconciling all of those. I'm going to get a clean brush actually, clean and dry. And just start pushing paint around. Oops. Yeah, come on, stay dry, brush. Look at you stripping paint. What on earth? And it's okay to touch your painting. You can intervene with your finger. Let's take a little more umber for that. And that's another thing you can do. Now that I've built the highlights and shadows and stuff into this brow, I can come in with the umber and really carve these suckers out. Really give definition. God, Aku just looked livid. Do not know what I did to piss him off. Okay. Because we're pressed for time, I'm going to get out here and just finish the composition, and then I'm going to work on it some more, and you'll see the finished product at the end of the video. So I'm going to put my little 1-inch down for a second. I'm going to grab my, not 1-inch, my little pencil brush, and I'm going to pick up my 1-inch. And I'm just going to take some, pull my blue out, pull some black into that. Got a little too much black there, but what's that gonna do? Yeah, that works. I'm just gonna walk this in kind of around my edges. Almost like I'm doing clouds. I'm kind of pushing and twisting one way or the other. You can do this however you want. I'm just trying to frame it up a little bit more. Ooh, that was cool. All right. That looks fucking epic. This is Aku. This is what happens if you mess with Crash. This is how he comes at you. It's like a spider monkey. All right, so we got our vignette in there. I might continue to work on that, but I like where it is at this point. I'm gonna do my outline on Aku real quick. Probably just do black with that. Yeah, that's dirty. Set him over there to dry, and I'm going to go back to, who did I use? I like that pencil brush. Number 2. And we're just going to visit some black. A we'll do black. And it'll melt in with that extra, the other color too. So, and you can exaggerate with this line too. It's not just about, again, putting black on the outside, but maybe there's a part of his form that you couldn't really establish in the colored painting part, but you can really accentuate in this outline. Ooh, look at that nice chisel right there. See, that's what I was going for right here, but it's rounded. But that's okay. I might try to fix it, but it's also facial hair, so there's not really, you know, an edge or a rounded part, if that makes sense. It can be whatever you want it to be. And maybe since he's like in motion and he's coming out of this cloud, maybe that line kind of tapers off towards the bottom. And the more I do this, the more confident I get in my strokes, because I know areas where I've succeeded in creating the edges I want and where I've failed. Then I go back and try to hone them in. All right. Wow. Well, if there's ever a case for chasing your curiosities, this is it. I think this is the best thing I've painted so far, and I just had a blast with it because I did it my own way for the most part. Just forged ahead and just had to make decisions in real time, and I mean, I want to get better than this, but I'm very happy with it. But stick around because I'm not done with this. I'm going to keep doing the details, and then at the end of the episode, you'll see the final shot. So keep this in mind, and then when you see that one, you're like, man, he added a lot to it. I'm going to finish those feathers, going to texture that wood, work on these highlights a little more, and maybe this vignette, and call that a painting. As always, thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, share this with your friends. I love when people find this and they call me or tweet me or whatever, and they're like, I'm watching the Joe painting. And it's so exciting for me. So yeah, pass this around. I hope you liked it. This is a good sign for the future of the Joe painting because we're skyrocketing. All right, well, I'll see you next time. Thanks.